We are on the morning break of day 24 of the Undercover Policing Inquiry, Tranche 3, Phase 1. We've been listening. It's the final day of questioning of Peter Francis. Apologies, I've got a sore throat. Peter Francis was an undercover police officer who infiltrated anti-racist and family justice campaigns between 93 and 97. He also went whistleblower in 2010. This morning has mostly looked at his exfiltration. I just want to highlight one thing. In his leaving card, one of the notes that his fellow officers wrote in was, "They're all weary fuckers and they deserve to die."
Yeah, that was quite a moment. We saw it brought up on the screen. I don't know if that point, there's been a few bits where the YouTube's dropped out, I think, so I don't know if you would have seen it from home, but they brought up on the screen the inside of a card. He told us that the front of the card had a picture of Darth Vader on it, and the inside of the card was all some of the characters we know and love, like Bob Lambert and Jim Boyling. They'd all signed it. It wasn't clear who had actually written the "weary fuckers" comment. Someone told me they thought it might have been Jenna. But yes, one of his colleagues wrote that. And Pete Francis, when asked about it, kind of said, well, obviously I wouldn't have wanted anybody to die. But then he actually kind of basically did say, it was like, oh, God, I just had to listen to people talking about left-wing politics morning, noon and night. They never, ever, ever stopped. And it was just like, well, what the fuck were you doing there? Do you know what I mean? Like, to blame other people for having interests when you're basically inveigling yourself into their space. And I mean, it was that, I don't know, I've been quite sympathetic towards Peter Francis, but somebody replayed for me this morning his supposed apology to Dwayne Brooks from yesterday, where he pretty much said, if I'd been there on the night of the murder, everything would have been all right because, I can handle myself. And the narcissism and the self-obsession today. I mean, he even said, when he was talking about his exfiltration strategy, he said, of course it was always me first, and that was my main concern. And it's really coming across today. Just the meism of it is quite wearing.
On that exfiltration strategy, I mean, it was very convoluted. Rather than just go to a foreign country, claim some mental breakdown and go to a foreign country, as most of the undercover officers did, he started off with a trip with 3 friends. I mean, people who he'd met through his undercover deployment, but who he never reported on. People he bonded with over martial arts, techno music, house music, taking ecstasy tablets.
And I mean, he like, honestly, he just went on a bender and he was asked how he paid for it. And he kind of talked about different things about credit cards, and Barr was just like, so public money then.
Which his response was, well, in the scheme of things, for what the SDS spent money on, it wasn't that expensive.
Yeah, he specifically said that about the fact that as part of this ridiculously convoluted exit strategy, when he headed back to the UK, he left his SDS credit card with the PIN number written on the back in a phone box in the hope that someone would keep using it. I presume in order to make his managers think that he was still in Spain while he was on the way home. I found that bit quite hard to follow, what on earth was actually going on, but it kind of gives you an idea of just how mental the whole like exfiltration strategy stuff is. And I had this impression of him on a bender in Spain, not really being in touch with the office, and then calling he says he rang his ex-wife on her birthday, and that she said, look, your managers are trying to get hold of you. And he kind of realized that his career was on the line if he didn't show up. So he steals the number plates off a foreign car, puts them on his van, drives it in back to the UK. I mean, it felt quite mad, the whole description.
I mean, it just called to mind the kind of how so many of them seem to lose the plot when they're being asked to withdraw from being an undercover officer, and they start doing things like,
your light's gone red on there. I don't know.
Maybe the microphone's died on me. We saw it as well with like James Thompson. That like he created this other undercover identity to do with what? I mean, what was the use of him leaving the credit card? What was the use of him putting the different number plate on? It all just seemed like he'd got into this habit of doing like secretive things, and he couldn't give it up.
Yeah, like there was a definite kind of sense of kind of madness about it. It was quite hard to follow. We then went on to talk about kind of what he did after he left, and there was he was talking about how he was asked to speak to a number of undercover officers. I'm going to have to be a little bit circumspect about what we say, because there's a chunk of that there was a breach. But I think it's okay to say that he says he was asked to talk to HN41, who it turns out was infiltrating the Socialist Worker Party but wasn't doing very well. And there was a very interesting document called up, not sure if anyone's seen it, mentions Peter Francis, mentions Jim Boyling, all taking part in a conversation with HN81 about how it wasn't really working out in the Socialist Worker Party. Socialist Worker Party weren't doing very much, a bit of a low ebb for the organised left. And it discussed the possibility of HN81 moving to spy on the environmentalists, i.e. us. And I thought that was very interesting. It had Boyling recommending that HN81 go to Lyminge Forest. There was a road protest site at Lyminge Forest at the time, and spend some time there before coming back to London as a way of kind of building his credentials in the environmental movement, which is exactly what Rod Richardson did in 1998. He went to Rettendon in Essex, protest site, exactly what Lynn Watson did in 2002. She went to, I'm not sure, I can't remember the name, but anyway, she went to a protest site in Sussex, I think, which I mean, I'm always alert to these crossovers. The police would like you to think that the SDS was shut down and the MPOIU was a totally different animal. But there's obvious crossovers in tradecraft, and that's quite a specific piece of advice coming from an SDS officer in 1998, which is then put into practice by the MPOIU in 1998. So that perked my ears up a bit.
He really didn't like HN81, very negative about HN81. This is the undercover officer who's the cover name Dave Hagen, who has managed to get out of giving evidence to the inquiry due to his PTSD diagnosis from 2001. But yeah, I mean, according to Peter Francis, he was kind of useless, mucked up his initial deployment. He was unaware that he'd been given a roving brief. And he couldn't say, what even is that? Yeah, really quite negative. He talked about he had questions about his mentoring role. It seemed he spoke to quite a few undercover officers after he'd finished his deployment, and before, in fact. And he was asked about his advice on sex. He said he gave the same advice he was given: use a condom, don't fall in love, don't let them fall in love with you. The usual stuff. I mean, he's been quite candid about that. There's more questions to come, apparently, about sexual relationships later on.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that stood out for me, and I don't know if this is going to be picked up by Barr, is that he kind of, I mean, it's all part of this like very high opinion that Peter Francis obviously has of himself, which is quite wearing, to use a term they would use. But he claimed that, you know, his tradecraft was very good, whereas others like Mark Jenner had what he described as quite wonky tradecraft. And he referred specifically to Jenner showing up with his own credit card. Now, anyone who's seen the ITV documentary will know that it was Jenner having Mark Cassidy having a credit card in the name Mark Jenner, which his then girlfriend Alison found. That was one of the things that led to her eventually figuring out his real name. But what's interesting is Peter Francis appeared to be implying that was something that everybody knew about in 1998, which was why Peter Francis, was invited to mentor some of the officers, whereas Jenner, for example, was not, because his tradecraft was wonky. Now, this could be Peter Francis, having watched the ITV documentary, got this piece of information and projected it back, because a lot of his evidence suggests a somewhat imperfect grasp of timelines. But it also could be that you know, that was known about, and it's something that I hope is picked up, because it raises obvious questions about what was known about Jenna's relationship at the time. I think people are going back in. We've got to run.
Yeah, we should go back in. We'll be doing another video at lunchtime. Thanks for joining.